What do you do when the one person who truly sees you is the one person you can never touch? For 20 years, I built a life on a foundation of quiet compromises, being the woman everyone needed me to be, the stable wife, the responsible stepmother. I thought I had found safety. Then, she looked at me, really looked, and the carefully constructed walls of my world began to crack. She was the mirror reflecting the woman I'd buried long ago, and in her eyes, I saw a terrifying, exhilarating truth. Our love wasn't just forbidden. It was a force that threatened to shatter a family, a community, and the very identity I had clung to for survival. Now, with the whole world watching and judging, I have to choose: remain in the comfortable lie, or risk everything for the one thing that has ever felt real. Subscribe for more heartfelt and powerful lesbian stories. The Mirror and the Marrow. Chapter 1. The silence in the car was a physical presence. It was the first thing she noticed about the girl, this daughter of the man she had just married. Not her eyes, which were the color of dark honey, or the defiant set of her jaw, but the profound, almost aggressive silence that she wore like a second skin. Robert's hand was warm on her knee. "Almost there, sweetheart." His voice was meant to be reassuring, but it only made the silence in the backseat feel heavier. She risked a glance in the rearview mirror. Maya was staring out the window, her forehead pressed against the glass, watching the manicured suburbs of Robert's life give way to the older, more established neighborhoods of the city she called home. "They're home now. You'll love the house, Maya," she said, her voice too bright, too eager. "It has a huge backyard. And your room faces the east. The morning light is beautiful." Maya's eyes flickered to the mirror, meeting hers for a fraction of a second. There was no curiosity there, no gratitude. Only a flat, assessing look before she returned to the window. The message was clear: I am not part of this conversation. That was 7 years ago. The memory was as sharp as a splinter as she stood in the kitchen, her fingers tracing the cool lip of a coffee mug. 7 years. She had watched the girl become a woman, had watched the silence harden into a shell, and then, miraculously, begin to crack. She had been there for the skinned knees, the whispered anxieties about school, the first heartbreak. She had done what Robert had asked. She had helped raise her. And in doing so, Maya had raised her back. The thought was so audacious, so terrifyingly true, that her hand trembled, sloshing coffee onto the counter. She was wiping it up with a frantic hand when she heard the soft pad of footsteps on the stairs. Maya appeared in the doorway, dressed in a simple t-shirt and jeans, her dark hair still damp from the shower. At 21, she had shed the gawky uncertainty of adolescence for a quiet, grounded grace. She didn't speak, just moved to the coffee machine, her shoulder brushing against her as she reached for a mug. The contact was brief, accidental, but it sent a current through Clara so violent it stole her breath. It had been like this for months. A brush of hands passing a book, a knee touching under the dinner table, a gaze held a moment too long. 1,000 tiny intimacies that built a new, unspoken language between them. "You didn't sleep," Maya said softly. It wasn't a question. Clara watched the line of Maya's back, the way her shirt stretched across her shoulders. "How did you know?" "I heard you. Pacing. After Dad went to bed." Maya turned, leaning against the counter, her mug cradled in both hands. Her eyes, those honey-colored eyes, were direct now, seeing everything. "I watched the sky change from blue to gray. I was at my window." The admission hung in the air between them, fragile and immense. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. "I watched you watching the sky." She wanted to say it. She wanted to cross the 3 feet of linoleum that separated them and what? "You shouldn't touch me like that." The memory of her own voice, strained and desperate, echoed from just yesterday. They had been in the study, surrounded by Robert's books. Maya had reached out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind Clara's ear, her fingers lingering on her cheek. Clara had flinched away as if burned, the words a panicked reflex. "You said that yesterday. And I meant it." Now, in the harsh light of morning, Maya's gaze was a challenge. "We could still leave," she whispered, the words so quiet they were almost swallowed by the hum of the refrigerator. The same hum from 7 years ago. "Just drive. Today." A wild, impossible hope flared in Clara's chest. It was followed immediately by a crushing wave of fatigue. The fatigue of a lifetime of being what others needed. The good wife. The supportive stepmother. The placid, uncomplaining woman. I'm tired of running, Clara admitted, the confession feeling like a betrayal of the very safety she had spent 40 years building. But I'm not sure I'm strong enough to stay. The back door opened, and Robert strode in, smelling of fresh air and the cigar he'd sneaked before breakfast. Strong enough for what? He boomed, his voice shattering the delicate tension in the room. He kissed Clara's temple, a habitual, proprietary gesture. Who's running? Not my girls. He smiled, a genial, oblivious smile, and clapped Maya on the shoulder. Ready for your big presentation today, kiddo? Maya's eyes never left Clara's. Ready as I'll ever be, she said, her voice a calm, steady lake beneath which unimaginable depths churned. Clara looked from her husband's believing face to the woman who saw straight through to her marrow. She felt the foundations of the life she had built, the 20-year edifice of her marriage to Robert, tremble. It wasn't Maya who was the danger. It was the truth. And Clara was holding the match. Chapter 2. The affair began not with a kiss, but with a book. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon, 6 months earlier. Robert was away on a business trip, a common occurrence. The house, which usually felt spacious, had become a cavern of echoing silence. Clara was in the living room, attempting to read, but the words swam on the page. She felt a familiar emptiness, a hollowed-out feeling that had been her constant companion for years, long before Robert, even. It was the feeling of being a guest in her own life. Maya found her there, staring blankly at the fire. You look lonely, Maya said, her voice softer than usual. She was holding 2 mugs of tea. I'm fine, Clara said automatically, the lie as practiced as a prayer. Maya didn't accept it. She sat on the opposite end of the sofa, tucking her feet beneath her. You always say that. But you're not. She nodded to the book in Clara's lap. Is it any good? Clara looked down at the novel, a bestseller about a woman rediscovering herself after a divorce. I don't know. I can't seem to concentrate. What do you like to read? Maya asked. When you can concentrate. It was such a simple question, but it struck Clara with unexpected force. No one had asked her that in years. Robert bought her books. He thought she should like political thrillers, historical epics, and she would dutifully try to read them, her mind wandering. Poetry, sometimes, Clara found herself saying. Old, sad poetry. And books about people who make messy, complicated choices. A small smile touched Maya's lips. So, real people. Yes, Clara said, a flicker of warmth igniting in her chest. Real people. Maya got up and went to the bookshelf, her fingers trailing along the spines. She pulled out a slender, worn volume. This was my mother's, she said, her back still turned. It's a collection of essays. About art and loss. I think you'd like it. She handed the book to Clara. Their fingers touched during the exchange, and this time, the contact was not accidental. It was deliberate. A offering. That night, Clara read the book. She devoured it. The essays were luminous and painful, speaking of a hunger for authenticity that mirrored the ache in her own soul. In the margins, in a delicate, looping script, were notes. Maya's mother's notes. And then, on the final page, a newer note, in Maya's own bold hand. She saw the world in shades of grey most people are afraid to name. I think you do, too. That was the beginning. The book became a totem, a secret shared between them. They began to talk, truly talk, in the quiet hours when Robert was absent. They talked about art, about fear, about the cages they felt trapped in. Maya, at 21, possessed a wisdom that seemed ancient. She saw the woman Clara had buried long ago, the woman who was passionate and curious and unafraid of depth. You married him because it was safe, Maya said one evening, not as an accusation, but a statement of fact. Clara didn't deny it. After a youth of uncertainty, Robert's solidity, his predictable world, had felt like a port in a storm. I thought it was what I needed. To be anchored. But anchors don't let you sail, Maya replied, her gaze steady. They just keep you in one place, even if the water around you turns to mud. Clara felt seen in a way that was terrifying and exhilarating. Maya was a mirror. She reflected back not the placid wife Robert saw, not the responsible stepmother she tried to be, but the raw, yearning woman underneath. She saw who Clara was before Clara had the courage to see it herself. The touches started then. A hand on the arm to emphasize a point. A hug goodbye that lasted a second too long. Each point of contact was a spark, igniting a fire Clara had thought long extinguished. She was 47 years old, and she was falling in love for the first time. And the object of that love was her husband's daughter. The guilt was a constant, gnawing companion. You were supposed to raise her. The voice in her head sounded like Robert's, like her mother's, like the entire world's. I did, she argued back silently. And she raised me back. She had taught Maya how to navigate high school social politics. Maya was teaching her how to navigate the treacherous geography of her own soul. The incident in the study yesterday had been a culmination of months of escalating tension. The air between them had been thick with everything unsaid. When Maya's fingers had touched her face, it had felt less like a caress and more like a completion. And the terror of that feeling had made Clara recoil. You shouldn't touch me like that. Why? Maya had challenged, her eyes blazing with a courage Clara envied. Because it's wrong. Or because it's the only thing that's ever felt right. Clara had no answer. She had fled the room, her own hypocrisy choking her. Now, standing in the kitchen with Robert cheerfully oblivious between them, Clara knew the time for secret conversations was over. The world they had built in the shadows was demanding to step into the light. Chapter 3. The storm broke 2 weeks later. It was Robert's birthday. Clara had organized a small dinner party, a few of his colleagues from the law firm, their wives. She played her part perfectly, the gracious hostess, the attentive wife. She laughed at the right moments, refilled wine glasses, and presented a homemade chocolate cake with a steady hand. But her eyes kept finding Maya, who was moving through the room with a quiet detachment, a ghost at the feast. Every time their gazes met, it was like a silent scream in the crowded room. The trouble started after the guests had left. Robert, flushed with wine and praise, put an arm around Clara's waist as she washed dishes. A perfect night, darling. Thank you, he said, his voice slurred slightly. He nuzzled her neck. Why don't you leave those? Come upstairs. Over his shoulder, Clara saw Maya standing in the doorway, watching them. Her expression was unreadable. I'll be up soon, Robert, Clara said, gently extricating herself. I just want to finish here. He sighed, a little petulantly, and trudged upstairs. The house fell silent, save for the running water and the clink of china. Maya stepped into the kitchen. You're so good at that. At what? At being what he needs. The perfect little wife. The words were not spiteful, but heavy with a profound sadness. Clara turned off the water and faced her, drying her hands on a towel. Maya, don't. Don't what? Don't point out that you're living a lie. That every time he touches you, you flinch. I saw it tonight. Everyone saw it, they just don't know how to look. It's not that simple, Clara whispered, her voice cracking. It is. Maya's composure broke. It is simple. You're miserable. I'm miserable. We have a chance to not be miserable. Why is that so complicated? Because he's your father. Clara hissed, the words tearing from her. Because I'm married to him. Because the world will call us monsters. I don't care what the world calls us. Maya took a step forward, her eyes blazing. I care what we call ourselves. Are we brave? Or are we cowards? It was then that they heard the creak on the stairs. They both froze, turning to see Robert standing in the kitchen doorway. His face, once jovial, was pale and confused. He had heard enough. What is going on? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. The kitchen clock ticked. Clara felt the world slow down, every detail sharpened. The soap bubble on the sponge, the crumb of chocolate cake on the counter, the desperate hope on Maya's face. Robert, Clara began, but her voice failed her. Maya, however, did not look away. She stood her ground, her chin raised. The girl was gone. In her place was a woman, ready for battle. Robert's eyes darted from his wife's terrified face to his daughter's defiant one. The pieces clicked into place, and his expression shifted from confusion to a dawning, horrified understanding. "Are you," he choked on the words. "Clara, are you admitting to a romantic relationship with my daughter?" The word admitting felt like a trap. It implied a crime. Clara looked at Maya, at this young woman who had held a mirror up to her soul and shown her a self she dared to love. She saw the truth reflected back at her, not as something sordid, but as something sacred. She took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was clearer than it had been in 20 years. "I'm admitting that I stopped lying about what I feel for once." The silence that followed was absolute. Robert stared at her as if she were a stranger. Perhaps she was. "You married me," he said, the words a low, wounded growl. He pointed a trembling finger at Maya. "She's a girl." "She's a woman," Clara corrected softly. "She's a mirror. She saw who I was before I did." Robert's face contorted in anger and pain. "You were supposed to raise her. That was the deal. You were the stable one, the one who would give her a normal life." "I did raise her," Clara said, her own tears starting to fall. "And she raised me back. 20 years I built this family with you, Robert. And now, maybe it was already broken. We just stopped acting like strangers." "Broken?" he roared, slamming his hand on the counter. "You're the one breaking it. You and her, this perversion." "It's not a perversion." Maya finally spoke, her voice shaking but strong. "We're not destroying anything. We're choosing something real." Robert looked back and forth between them, two allies standing against him in his own kitchen. The betrayal in his eyes was a physical thing. He shook his head, as if to clear it of a nightmare. "Get out," he whispered, his gaze fixed on Clara. "Get out of my house." Chapter 4. The news, of course, did not stay within the four walls of the kitchen. Robert, in his hurt and fury, told his sister, who told a friend, who told a reporter. The story was too salacious to resist. Prominent lawyer's wife in scandalous affair with stepdaughter. Clara found a cheap motel room on the outskirts of town. It smelled of stale cigarettes and disinfectant. She sat on the edge of the stiff bed, watching the news on the small, grainy television. There was a photo of her and Robert from their wedding day, and a more recent one of Maya, taken from her university website. The anchor's voice was a study in faux concern and lurid delight. A shocking betrayal that has torn a local family apart. The community is reeling. She turned it off. Her phone buzzed incessantly, reporters, unknown numbers, a few furious texts from former friends. She silenced it. A few days later, desperate for groceries, she went to a supermarket she never usually frequented. She kept her head down, sunglasses on, but she felt the stares. Whispers followed her down the aisles like a trail of breadcrumbs. She was in the frozen food section, her hand hovering over sad-looking pizza when she heard it. "That's her. That's the girl from the news." She turned. Two women, around her age, were glaring at her. One of them, her face pinched with judgment, shook her head. "She destroyed her own family," the woman said, her voice loud enough to carry. "You should be ashamed." The words were meant to wound, and they did. They tapped into the deep well of guilt and shame that Clara had been fighting. For a moment, she wanted to curl into a ball and disappear. But then she thought of Maya's face, of her courage. She thought of the mirror. Clara straightened her shoulders and met the woman's gaze. "You know what you read," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Not who I am." The woman sniffed. "I know wrong when I see it." Something in Clara snapped. The years of silence, of compliance, of swallowing her own truth, rose up in her like a tide. "I lived most of my life silent," Clara said, her voice ringing in the quiet aisle. A stock boy paused, watching. "I'm done with that. You can judge me all you want. But you don't know a thing about my life." She left her half-full cart in the middle of the aisle and walked out, her heart pounding not with fear, but with a fierce, wild liberation. She drove to the only place that felt safe, a secluded spot by the river she and Maya had discovered on one of their secret drives. She sat on a large, flat rock and watched the water flow, its constant movement a comfort. She didn't hear the car pull up, but she felt her presence. Maya sat down beside her, their shoulders not touching, but the space between them humming with energy. "I saw the news," Maya said quietly. "I'm sorry," Clara whispered. "I wanted to protect you. But I'm the danger. I've ruined your life." "You haven't ruined it," Maya said. "You've given me one." She paused. "He's kicked me out, too." Clara's head snapped up. "Oh, Maya." "No." Maya shrugged, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "It was inevitable. He can't look at me." She turned to Clara. "So, what now? What do you want?" Clara looked at the young woman beside her. She saw the strength, the resilience, but also the vulnerability. She saw the future, a future of sideways glances, of fractured relationships, of hardship. And she saw something else, a chance at authenticity. A chance to live a life that was entirely her own. "I spent 40 years being what others needed me to be," Clara said, the words a vow spoken to the river. "If I stay in this town, in this life, I'll do it again. I'll try to fix things, to apologize, to make it neat. I'll shrink back into the box." Maya watched her, waiting. "You're leaving," she said, not a question, but an acceptance. Clara nodded, a single, painful tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I have to." "Then stay," Maya pleaded, her own composure breaking. "Stay and be who you are. With me." The offer was so beautiful, so tempting. It was everything she wanted. And that was precisely why she couldn't accept it. "You deserve someone whole," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not someone who is just learning how to be a person. Not someone who is running from a train wreck." Maya was silent for a long time. The sun began to dip below the trees, casting long shadows. "Then let's rebuild from broken," she said finally. "Together." But Clara shook her head. "I can't. Not yet. I have to learn who I am when I'm not someone's wife or someone's stepmother. I have to know that the person I choose is me, not just a reaction to them." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, smooth stone she'd been holding. It was grey, with a single white vein running through it. She pressed it into Maya's hand. "Keep this," she said. "Until I figure out who I really am." Maya closed her fingers around the stone. "Will you come back?" Clara looked at her, memorizing the lines of her face in the dying light. "I don't wait anymore," she said. "I live. But the door stays open." She stood up, her legs feeling weak. She leaned down and, for the first time without fear or guilt, pressed a soft, lingering kiss to Maya's forehead. It was a kiss of promise, of grief, of immeasurable love. Then she turned and walked to her car. She didn't look back. She knew if she did, her resolve would crumble. As she drove away, leaving the town and her old life in the rearview mirror, the pain was excruciating. But beneath the pain, there was a spark. A tiny, fragile ember of hope. She thought loving someone meant keeping them safe. Turns out it means letting them choose their own path, even if it leads them away from you. Even if it leads them into danger. Maybe the most dangerous kind of love isn't the one that breaks rules. It's the one that forces you to break yourself open, to examine the shattered pieces, and still choose to stay open. To remain vulnerable to the world, and to the possibility of being whole again, on your own terms. She drove into the gathering dark, the road ahead unknown. For the first time in 47 years, Clara was not running away. She was moving toward something. Toward herself. And somewhere, in the silence of her own heart, she knew she had heard Maya, even in their separation. The connection was not broken. It was transformed. The door was open. And that, for now, was enough.